All right, let's talk about the blood-brain barrier. First of all, a couple things that you should kind of be familiar with is that your brain is a very, very sensitive structure, okay? And obviously, it's one of the most important structures in your body. Excuse me, one of the most important organs in your body. So it's important that this organ be nourished and gets priority when it comes to nutrient supply, but also that it becomes separate from the external environment and anything that can come in contact with the external environment. So that brings us to the blood-brain barrier, the triple B here. And basically what this barrier does is what it says. It's a barrier. So it is going to prevent the passage of certain substances, right, into the nervous tissue or the brain's interstitial fluid tissue, okay? So a big role for, or function of the blood-brain barrier is to prevent harmful substances from interacting with the brain. Harmful substance could be, bless you, could be a virus, could be a pathogen of some sort, like a bacteria, right? But also drugs, alcohol, anything that can compromise nervous tissue function will be considered to be a harmful substance, okay? So essentially, the triple B is made up of these specialized capillaries, and the reason why they're specialized is because, one, they have a thick basement membrane, not a thin, right? And they have these tight junctions, and these tight junctions, these specialized tight junctions, are these, well, first of all, a tight junction is where two endothelial cells, which are the simple squamous cells, all right, butt up against each other. Well, that's true. Yep. And again, there are limitations, Sean, to the blood-brain barrier. You know, you can get some, and it can't, you know, it can't protect us against the effects of alcohol because alcohol can diffuse right across the plasma membrane. But there are limitations, which is unfortunate, but it does protect us from a lot of different things. So the three parts of the blood-brain barrier that really help with its functionality are, one, tight junctions, thick basement membrane, but also the perivascular feet, which I mentioned before, were these extensions that come off the astrocytes. I'll come right back to this slide here. So here we can see, here's our astrocyte right here. Then it has these kind of pseudopod extensions that extend onto the capillaries here, okay? As you know, a capillary is going to be, all right, one cell layer thick. The endothelium is a simple squamous epithelium, right? And all epithelial tissue sits, right, on the basement membrane. So if we zoom in here, we can see, right, here's the endothelium, and then it sits on this thickened basement membrane. Here's the tight junction. Here's a tight junction. Here's a tight junction. And then these perivascular feet can manipulate, all right, the space in between these cells. So it can actually open up the space here and allow the passage of certain substances to cross over into the interstitial fluid here of the brain. Now, certain substances don't have a problem. Remember, what can cross over a plasma membrane? Or not over it? Small and nonpolar, okay? So certain substances can just go right through the actual endothelium here, okay? Glucose, obviously, is going to be a substance that's going to be larger, but it is, the astrocytes allow for the passage of glucose because that's the preferred or preferential fuel source. The brain loves itself some glucose, right? And in fact, the brain is the top billing organ for glucose, all right? So as long as the brain has enough glucose, then the other organs in the body will get whatever's kind of left over, right? It's like the king or queen, and then whatever else goes to the subjects. Well, that's pretty much how the brain is. It gets all the delicious glucose, and then whatever's left over goes elsewhere. But keep in mind that it's this barrier, this blood-brain barrier, is going to allow the passage of some structures and not of others. Absolutely. Yep. If we're in a situation in which gluconeogenesis isn't really creating too much glucose, then yes, your brain, if it has to, it will utilize ketones for energy source. So, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Jump into, so I showed you that picture. All right. Some of these slides, all right, we've already gone over in lecture, so. No, the brain's already labeled. It's labeled.
So what we already labeled was the 1, 2, 3, 12.
Cranial nerves?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's going to be on our lab.
Yep.
Yes.
Correct for the brain. Yep. All right. Speaking of that, the 1, 2, 3. Let's do the cranial nerves. Okay. I sent you out that in email, so this is just going to be a little bit more in depth for the notes here for the cranial nerves. So keep in mind there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and we are going to use Roman numerals. All right. So same thing as before. Okay. So we're going to use Roman numerals 1 through 12. Okay. So, first things first, cranial nerves are part of the peripheral nervous system. They are not part of the central nervous system. They come off the central nervous system, come off the brain, but they are part of the peripheral nervous system. Okay? So the names of the cranial nerves have to do with their function. Okay? So, and the first one is a real easy one, right? Because cranial nerve number 1, it has to do with olfaction. So olfactory nerve, all right, meaning it has to do with smell. Now I remember you have one nose. So cranial nerve number 1 is olfaction, smell. All right. Well, let me show you this picture real fast. This is what I sent out to you in the email. So I'm hoping that you have all that labeled in your book. Okay. If not, refer to the emails that I sent you in regards to the cranial nerve labeling. All right, so olfactory nerve 1, right? Cranial nerve number 1 is olfactory. Now, cranial nerves can be either sensory only, they can be motor only, or they can be both, motor and sensory. So I'll review that with you folks. So cranial nerve number 1, olfactory, is a sensory only nerve, okay? It has to do with smell. Simple. So you can see here in our picture, and this is kind of when we were talking about the skeleton and the bones here. Right, what we're seeing right up here, right? This is the ethmoid bone, okay? And in the ethmoid bone, we had the cribriform plates. The cribriform plate had those holes there. Those were called olfactory foramen, and that's where these axons would come down and enter into the nasal cavity here, right? Now, your sensory neurons are up here in the superior portion of the nasal cavity. That's why a lot of times when people, in order to smell better, they'll take a big whiff or inhale more because that allows the air or whatever you're smelling to circulate more in the nasal cavity. Most importantly, you've got to get it up to the superior portion here because that's where you're going to see all of the sensory neurons there. Okay? So, yes, sir?
Is there any rhyme or reason to how these were labeled? They enable me to figure out which is the.
Which one are you talking about?
Why 1 is the olfactory, why 2 is the optic, or
Is it kind of arbitrary?
yeah.
No. I mean, when they originally labeled it, they started with the top portion first and just worked their way down. Yeah. Oh, gotcha. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, exactly. So if you had to on the test write out the answer, you could write either cranial nerve number 1 like that, or you could write olfactory nerve. You don't have to write out cranial nerve 1, olfactory nerve. Either or. So I'll put a line in between. So you have 2 answer choices: cranial nerve 1 or olfactory nerve. Okay. Yeah. All right. Second one, optic nerve. Okay, cranial nerve number 2. And this is another sensory nerve. Right, easy to remember, you have 2 eyes. Okay, so this is for vision only. Okay, so cranial nerve number 2. All right, it's basically that nerve gets formed. All right, starting at the retina, and it goes all the way back to the optic chiasm. Don't be fooled, folks, when you're labeling. Okay, here are the optic nerves, here and here. This is olfactory. Right? Olfactory is more midline. Okay, sometimes people have mistaken these olfactory tracts here for the optic nerve. Don't be mistaken. Okay, these are more the olfactory is more midline. Optic is going to be more lateral. Okay, all right. Number 3. This is the first of 3 muscles, three cranial nerves that are going to be responsible for controlling muscles of the eye. And so this one is called oculomotor. So it tells you what it's doing. Okay, it is going to be the cranial nerve that is going to stimulate certain eye movements. Okay, so it is a motor-only nerve. Okay, so it is going to move the eye in certain directions. It's going to raise the levator palpebrae superioris. That's the muscle of your eyelid, of your upper eyelid. So it's going to raise your eyelid. It's also going to change the shape of your pupil. It will make it larger. Okay? And then, oh wait. Excuse me. It'll make it smaller. Excuse me. I know. And then finally, it will cause it will change the shape of your lens. That process is called accommodation. Okay, so when you're looking at something far away, and then you immediately look down at your cell phone, for example. All right, so when your eyes have to focus on that whatever it was that you were looking at far away, and then when you look at something closer, that process is called accommodation, right? And so the oculomotor nerve will change the shape of your lens to accommodate for focusing of that object, whatever is closer to you, okay? All right, the next cranial nerve is cranial nerve number 4, trochlear nerve. Trochlear means pulley, okay? And it's also a motor nerve, and it is going to stimulate one muscle. That's it, in the eye. Another eye muscle. It's called the superior oblique muscle. Okay? So if we look here, right, here is the trochlea, which is an actual like loop of tissue here. And so the tendon of the superior oblique muscle goes through this little loop, and then it attaches onto the superior lateral corner of your eyeball. Okay? So when that muscle contracts, it allows you to look down and out. Okay? So one nerve, one muscle. All right, that's trochlea, cranial nerve number 4. The 5th cranial nerve, all right, is trigeminal. It's what we refer to as a mixed nerve. What does mixed mean? That's right, booyah. Both sensory and it's going to be motor, okay? So this nerve is going to control all the muscles of mastication. That's chewing. Okay, so masseter, right, temporalis, lateral and medial pterygoid. So when you're chewing, you're using the motor portion of the trigeminal nerve. Also is going to get somatic sensation to your face. Okay? So pretty much from the middle portion of, if I extend your skull back like this, okay? So pretty much from here all the way down to your eyes. All right, there's 3 parts of the trigeminal nerve. All right, there's 3 divisions to it. All right, you've got the ophthalmic, the maxillary division, and you have the mandibular division. Okay. So here's the mandibular branch. It's not important that you know all of these, okay? But it is important that you know that each of those branches is responsible for a specific area of sensation on your face. The ophthalmic division is responsible from the top of the head there where I was showing you all the way down to the eyes, okay? And then your maxillary division is responsible for around the maxillary bone, okay, your upper jaw. And then the mandibular division is obviously your mandible. Okay, so those 3 divisions of the trigeminal, right, are responsible for those 3 regions of your face. Okay, so somatic sensation from the face, and then muscles of mastication. Okay, mixed nerve. Number 6, abducens. Abducens, this is the third cranial nerve that controls eye movement, right? And it controls lateral rectus. And that's the muscle that sits here on the lateral part of your eye. Okay? So when you contract that muscle, it causes your eyeballs to look towards your ears. All right, so you'll look laterally, you'll look out to the side. We call that abduction. How do you do that?
I was thinking about trying to do.
No, I know what you're saying. No, I know what you're saying. I know. Yes, it's also a motor-only nerve. Okay? So we've learned 3 cranial nerves that control the eye movements. Ocular motor, okay, trochlea, and then abducens, cranial nerve 3, 4, and 5. Still. Well, we're going to talk about, I'm going to wait on the other part there. I don't want to throw too much into your brains right now. All right, so that's cranial nerve number 6. Cranial nerve number 7, facial, is another mixed nerve. Okay? So easy enough. It's going to control the muscles of facial expression, all the skeletal muscles there, frowning, all right, smiling, puffing your cheeks out, all that fun stuff. And then also, it's going to be responsible for the taste sensations of your tongue. That's going to be the sensory portion of it. Okay? So muscles of facial expression and taste for your tongue. Primarily the anterior 2/3. Okay? If we're looking at your tongue like this, right? The anterior 2/3 is going to be this region right up here. That's going to be facial. Okay. All right. Next, vestibulocochlear nerve. Right, cranial nerve number 8. Now you can see by its name, it's telling you what it does. Vestibular has to do with balance. Okay. Vestibular system. Cochlear has to do with hearing. So this is a sensory nerve, and it's involved in hearing equilibrium. Okay? Vestibular cochlear nerve. When I say that's an easy one to remember, that it pretty much the name of this nerve tells you what it does. There's some that make sense. There's some you're just like, what the heck? This doesn't make sense to me. All right, trochlea, abducens. I mean, kind of abducens, abduct. All right. Then you got cranial nerve number 9, glossopharyngeal nerve. This is another mixed nerve. All right. So the sensory portion is that it is going to deal with taste and touch. Now remember, facial had to do with just taste. Okay. And so I drew that weird picture of the tongue there. The anterior 2/3 is cranial nerve. I'm just going to use the American numeral here. That's 7, and then the posterior 1/3 is glossopharyngeal for taste. Then glossopharyngeal has to do with generalized touch for the tongue. So taste sensations is both 7 and 9, but overall touch sensation of the tongue is glossopharyngeal. Then it also has to do with the motor component of the pharynx muscle, and the muscle, where is it? Is it here? Yep. Stylopharyngeus muscle. That's this little muscle that comes off the styloid process of the temporal bone there. You remember the styloid process that we saw? Okay. We call that stylopharyngeus. All right, that's glossopharyngeal. All right. Now this next nerve is, if you have a test question, you have no idea what the answer is. None. And Vegas is an answer, you guess Vegas. Okay. Now water's other stuff. If it's Vegas and water, then you're screwed. Because then you don't know which one to pick. I would go with Vegas. Right? Vagus is another mixed nerve, okay? And if you look at this picture here, I'm not going to take the time to go through everything here, okay? But All right. Vagus is going to control all these muscles that you're seeing here in your throat, all right, your pharyngeal muscles, in your larynx, which is your voice box. Smooth muscle located in all these tissues, all right, in your lungs, in your bronchioles, all right, in these other smooth muscle tissues here of the digestive system. Point being is, vagus nerve controls all that muscle tissue, all right, in what's pictured here. Then, to make things even more complicated, all right, all these tissues that you see here, all of the sensory information, right, that these tissues are going to relay up to the brain is going to travel on the vagus nerve, right? And we refer to that as the parasympathetic output, okay? So, for example, you have a big meal. Your stomach starts to stretch out. You have stretch receptors in your stomach, right? Those stretch receptors send their information up to the brain via the vagus nerve, okay? So it'll transmit that information, okay? You get to learn about some of that stuff. So vagus nerve is a very, very important cranial nerve because it does so much, okay? All right, number 11, accessory nerve, okay? This is another motor nerve, right? And it's going to control muscles in your neck and your throat. Now, accessory nerve specifically is going to innervate the trapezius muscle, all right? Your sternocleidoid mastoid muscle. Those are some of the skeletal muscles that it's going to control. So an easy way to determine if that nerve is still intact, you just test the muscular strength of somebody. Hey, can you do me a favor and shrug your shoulders, and you push your hands down on their shoulders and they try to shrug it up? And you can say, oh, okay, accessory nerve is working okay. Okay? Swallowing is another way. If someone's complaining of, hey, I'm having difficulty swallowing, right? Or if you're suspecting that accessory nerve is having an issue, have them swallow something. If you're having trouble, then you can start there. Sometimes the accessory nerve is called the SAN. It stands for spinal accessory nerve, especially when we're talking about when it's innervating the trapezius muscle or the sternocleidoid mastoid muscle. All right, and then finally, last, but certainly not least, okay, we've got our hypoglossal nerve, okay? Hypoglossal nerve, all right, is going to control all of your tongue muscles, and it's motor only. So when you're looking at that email that I sent you, that Word document, and it talks about, all right, the different cranial nerves, there's a brief function that they do, if it's spine, if it's sensory, motor, or both, right? So go from that if you want to know, and then you can branch out from there. But know all that stuff on that list, okay? And balance and equilibrium. You're in equilibrium. Yep. Cranial nerve 6, you got it. All right, so this again, when you look at this nerve here, the name of it, ABD, abducens, all right, that tells you what the muscle that it innervates is going to be doing. It is going to abduct or, well, yeah, contract the lateral rectus there. Do you?
One thing, and very good.
That one's complicated.
Yeah.
And it's horrible grammar.
There's two that I know, and the OOO, such as page, something build it off. The AA.
Yes, I've heard that one. Yeah, something. Yeah. So.
I just saw one that I showed her, and I don't know.
It's a little inappropriate.
Yeah.
But see, I'm going to be honest with you. The inappropriate ones sometimes you can Google, but the inappropriate ones are the ones that people have an easier time remembering. So again, whatever works for you. Judgment-free zone. Did you,
Like,
was it inappropriate?
no,
Oh.
like,
Let's party!
let's grab some beers or something.
There's some good ones out there. I got to go back and wrap up some of the stuff that I didn't catch up on in lecture. I'm actually going to